He was the kind of man everyone admired from a distance, but no one really knew closely. He had the kind of face people saw on magazine covers, always calm and serious, dressed in tailored suits, always talking about success and goals. But behind that sharp look and quiet pride was a man who hadn't laughed in a long time. Every morning he would wake up in his big apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city skyline. The place was spotless, but it felt lifeless. There were no photos on the walls, no laughter in the air, no one waiting for him at breakfast. Only silence. His days were filled with meetings, phone calls, and the sound of heels clicking on office floors. Everyone respected him, his staff, his clients, even his competitors. But when the day ended and the doors of his car closed behind him, all that respect turned into loneliness. He had success, money, and everything people dream about. But when he came home at night, he had no one to talk to, no one who cared if he was happy or tired. It wasn't always like that. Once he had someone he thought he'd share his life with. But years ago, that ended in a way that left him cold inside. After that, he built walls around his heart, around his life. Work became his only escape, the only thing that didn't betray him. But deep down, even he knew something was missing. It was a Sunday afternoon in early spring. The air was cool and the sun peeked through drifting clouds. He had no real reason to leave his house that day. But something inside him wanted to get out, to breathe air that didn't smell like polished floors and office perfume. So he took a drive to a quiet park on the edge of the city. It was the kind of place where families came with kids, couples walked their dogs, and old people fed pigeons. He parked his car, put his phone on silent, and started walking without direction. He sat down on a wooden bench under a big old tree. Around him, children were laughing, parents were calling out names, and the sound of a small fountain filled the air. It was peaceful, but also a little sad. Watching other people's happiness made him realize how empty his own life had become. He noticed a small girl playing near the swings. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6. She wore a faded pink jacket and tiny shoes that had seen better days. Her hair was tied in a messy ponytail, and she held a small teddy bear with one ear missing. She was alone. He watched her run, pick flowers, talk to her teddy, and laugh all by herself. For a moment he thought maybe her parents were nearby, but minutes passed and no one came. She didn't seem scared though, just cheerful in her own little world. He looked away, trying not to stare, but then heard a small voice. "Excuse me, mister?" He turned, a little startled. The small girl stood in front of him, holding her teddy out like it was something precious. "Can you help me?" she asked softly. He blinked. "Help you? With what?" She looked down at her teddy's neck where a small ribbon had come loose. His bow came off. "I don't know how to fix it." He smiled slightly for the first time in days. "Let me see." She handed him the teddy with full trust, watching closely as he carefully retied the tiny ribbon. Her eyes were big and bright, full of innocent curiosity. "Thank you," she said, hugging the bear tightly. Then she tilted her head. "Why are you sitting alone?" He hesitated. "Just needed some air. Are you sad?" she asked simply. He looked at her, unsure how to answer. "Maybe a little." She nodded as if she understood completely. "When I feel sad, I eat candy," she said, digging into her small pocket and pulling out a crumpled piece of wrapped toffee. She held it out to him. "Here, it helps." He couldn't help but laugh quietly. "You're giving me your candy?" She nodded seriously. "You look like you need it more." He accepted it, smiling. "Thank you. That's very kind of you." "You're welcome," she said proudly, climbing onto the bench beside him like it was the most natural thing in the world. For a few moments, they just sat there watching ducks swim in the pond nearby. She kicked her legs gently, humming a small tune. "What's your name?" he asked. She told him and then pointed to her teddy. "And this is Mr. Bear. He doesn't talk much, but he listens." "That's important," he said. "Sometimes we all just need someone to listen." She nodded. "That's what my mama says too." He hesitated before asking softly, "Is your mama here with you?" She looked toward the other side of the park. "She's working. She told me to play here for a little bit. She works at that big building near the gate. Sometimes she takes long, but I don't mind." He followed her gaze and saw a cleaning service van parked nearby. He realized then that her mother must have been one of the workers tidying up the park facilities. The thought hit him gently. How hard life must be for a woman raising a child alone. Working so her daughter could still laugh like that. They talked for a while longer about her favorite cartoon, Her school, her dream to have a big house with pancakes every morning. He found himself smiling genuinely, something he hadn't done in a long time. When the sun began to dip lower, her mother appeared at a distance, waving for her to come. The girl jumped down from the bench. "That's Mama, I have to go now." He nodded, standing up. "It was nice meeting you." She grinned, hugging her teddy. "You too, mister." Then, without warning, she wrapped her tiny arms around his leg in a quick hug before running off. He watched her run toward her mother, her laughter echoing behind her like music. For a few seconds he stood frozen, his heart strangely warm. That night, back in his apartment, he couldn't stop thinking about that small girl with the missing ear teddy bear. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat by the window, looking at the lights of the city below. It was strange how a random meeting with a child had shaken something deep inside him. The next Sunday, he went back to the same park. He told himself he just needed some fresh air again, but in truth, he was hoping to see her. He sat on the same bench, watching the families pass by. After a while, he began to think maybe she wouldn't come. But then, from the corner of his eye, he saw her running across the grass, teddy bear bouncing in her arms. "You came back," she shouted, beaming. He smiled despite himself. "And you remembered me." "Of course. You fixed Mr. Bear's bow. We're friends now." She climbed up beside him again, unwrapping 2 candies this time. "One for you, one for me." He laughed softly. "You really like candy, huh?" "It's for happy days," she said. "Mama says we should share good things." They spent the afternoon talking again. She showed him how she could swing really high now, told him about her new shoes her mama bought, and even made him laugh by pretending her teddy could talk. He didn't realize how much time had passed until the park lights came on. Her mother arrived, looking tired but smiling politely when she saw her daughter talking to him. He stood up, introducing himself politely. "Your daughter is quite something," he said. "Very bright," the woman smiled shyly. "She talks to everyone. I hope she wasn't bothering you." "Not at all," he said quickly. "She made my day better." The woman nodded and took her daughter's hand. Before leaving, the girl turned and waved. "Bye, mister. See you next Sunday." He hesitated, then smiled. "Maybe?" When they left, he sat back down, feeling a strange calmness. For the first time in years, he didn't feel completely alone. There was something pure and kind about that small child who had no idea who he was, no interest in his wealth, and no reason to care. Yet she did, in her own innocent way. He started visiting the park more often. Sometimes she was there, sometimes she wasn't. But whenever she came, the world seemed brighter. She'd talk nonstop, telling him stories about her friends, her mama, or how she wanted to have a daddy someday so they could all go for ice cream together. He listened quietly, never interrupting, just smiling and nodding. Each time she mentioned the word daddy, he felt a soft tug in his heart. He didn't know why, but something about her words felt like a whisper meant just for him. One afternoon, as she was leaving with her mother, she turned back and said, "You know, mister, you look happier now." He blinked, surprised. "Do I?" She nodded confidently. "Because you smile now. I think Mr. Bear likes that." He laughed gently. "Tell Mr. Bear thank you for noticing." She grinned and waved again before running off. When she disappeared into the crowd, he sat there for a long time, staring at the empty swing she had just been on. There was a warmth spreading through him he couldn't quite explain. For years, he'd built walls to keep people out. But that little girl, with her candy and broken teddy, had somehow found a way in. And though he didn't know it yet, that small, innocent bond would soon change everything he thought he knew about love, family, and what it meant to belong. Days passed, and work once again tried to swallow him whole. Meetings filled his mornings, reports took over his afternoons, and loneliness waited at his door every night. But something had changed. Somewhere between those long hours and sleepless nights, his thoughts kept returning to that little girl with the missing ear teddy bear. He would catch himself smiling at random times, during a boring call, while signing papers, even while waiting for his coffee. He tried to brush it off, telling himself it was nothing. But deep down, he knew she had awakened something inside him that he thought was long gone. The next weekend, he went back to the park. He told himself it was just for some fresh air again, but he knew he was hoping to see her. The air smelled like freshly cut grass, and the laughter of children echoed all around. He sat on the same bench beneath the tree, pretending to read a Newspaper, though he didn't turn a single page, and then he heard it. A tiny, cheerful voice calling out, "Mister!" He looked up, and there she was, running toward him with her teddy bouncing in her arms. Her cheeks were rosy from the cold, and her smile was as wide as ever. "You came again," she said excitedly. He smiled warmly. "Looks like we both did." She climbed up onto the bench and placed her teddy on his lap as if introducing an old friend. "Mr. Bear missed you," she said seriously. "Well, I missed him too," he replied. "And you?" Her face lit up. "You did?" He nodded. "Of course." She opened her small backpack and pulled out a pack of cookies. "Mama said I can share these today, but only if you promise to eat two." "Two?" he asked playfully. "That's a big responsibility," she giggled. "It's the rule." He took 2 cookies and bit into one while she nibbled on hers, crumbs sticking to her chin. For a moment, the world around them faded. It was just the two of them. Simple, peaceful, and full of warmth. They talked about school, the birds, and the way clouds looked like giant marshmallows. He found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in years. Every word she spoke, every silly thing she said, chipped away at the coldness he had carried for so long. After a while, she asked suddenly, "Do you have any kids?" He hesitated. "No, I don't," she frowned slightly. "So you don't have anyone to play with?" He smiled sadly. "No, not really." Her eyes softened and she said quietly, "That's okay. You can play with me and Mr. Bear. We can be your friends." He swallowed hard, touched by her words. "I'd like that." From that day on, they met almost every weekend. Sometimes she'd run straight into his arms when she saw him, and sometimes she'd bring small gifts. Drawings, flowers, or a leaf she thought looked like a heart. He began to feel a strange sense of purpose again, but one Sunday as he was waiting on their usual bench, the girl didn't come. The park felt unusually quiet, the air heavier. He waited for nearly 2 hours, checking his watch again and again. Just as he was about to leave, he saw her mother walking through the park, holding her daughter's hand. The little girl's face was pale, her steps slow. Her mother looked tired, worry etched deep on her face. When she saw him, the girl's eyes brightened a little. "Mr." she whispered weakly. He stood up quickly. "What's wrong?" The mother sighed softly. "She's been a little sick, but she begged me to come see you for a few minutes." He knelt down so he could look at her closely. "You should be resting." She shook her head stubbornly. "I wanted to give you this." From her tiny pocket, she pulled out a folded paper and handed it to him. It was a simple drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands under a big sun. One figure was clearly her, one was her teddy bear, and the tall one in the middle looked like him. Above them, in uneven handwriting, were the words, "My happy people." He stared at it for a long time, unable to speak. Her mother smiled gently. "She talks about you all the time, you know. Says you make her laugh more than anyone." He smiled faintly, trying to hold back emotion. "She makes me laugh too." The mother nodded. "Thank you for being kind to her. It means a lot." He looked at the woman closely for the first time. Her clothes were neat but simple, her hands rough from work, and her eyes carried a quiet strength. It was clear life hadn't been easy for her, yet she held herself with grace. When they left that day, he stayed on the bench for a long time, staring at the drawing in his hands. Something inside him ached, a mix of sadness, hope, and something deeper he couldn't quite name. The next week he went to the park again, carrying a small bag. Inside were warm mittens, a tiny scarf, and a new ribbon for the teddy bear. When the girl arrived, healthy and smiling again, her joy was contagious. "For me?" she asked in surprise. "For you," he said softly. "So you stay warm." She wrapped the scarf around her neck proudly and hugged him tightly. "You're the best friend ever." Her mother, standing nearby, smiled shyly. "You really don't have to." "I want to," he interrupted kindly. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing to her. He could see it in her eyes, the quiet gratitude she didn't know how to express. Over the next few weeks, they began to talk more. Sometimes he'd walk them to the bus stop, carrying the girl's small backpack while she chatted endlessly. He learned that her mother worked long hours at a cleaning company, sometimes double shifts just to cover rent. Her husband had passed away when their daughter was only a baby. Since then, she had done everything alone. He admired her strength. It reminded him of something he had long forgotten, what it meant to fight for love, to live for someone else. One chilly evening after walking them to the bus stop, The little girl suddenly looked up and said, "You know, mister, you don't look lonely anymore," he smiled. "What makes you say that?" "Because you laugh more now," she said proudly. "Mama said laughing means your heart is happy." Her words hit him deeper than she knew. He had spent years hiding behind work and money, pretending he didn't care about happiness. But this small child with her kind heart and simple words had broken through all of that. Days turned into weeks, and soon, the park became their special place. People started recognizing them, the quiet man in the suit and the little girl with the pink jacket. They looked like family, even if neither of them said it out loud. One Sunday, while they were feeding ducks at the pond, she looked up suddenly and asked, "Mister, do you have someone who waits for you at home?" He paused, looking at the water. "No, not really." "Then who cooks for you?" "I usually order food," she gasped. "That's not good. You need someone to cook for you." "Mama says love starts with food," he laughed. "Your mama sounds very wise." "She is," the girl said proudly. Then after a pause, she added softly, "Maybe you can come have dinner with us one day. Mama makes soup that makes everything feel better." He was taken aback. "That's a very nice offer. Promise you'll come?" she said, holding out her pinky finger. He hesitated, then hooked his finger around hers. "Promise." That night, as he drove home, her small voice echoed in his mind. He realized that the thought of having dinner with them didn't feel strange at all. It felt right. The next week, when he went to the park, she wasn't there. Her mother came alone, looking worried. She told him that her daughter had a small fever and was resting at home. He immediately offered to drive them to the doctor, but she politely refused, saying it wasn't serious. Still, he couldn't shake off his concern. He ended up buying a small stuffed bunny and a card that said, "Get well soon." The next evening, he dropped it off quietly at their small apartment building, leaving it with the security guard so it wouldn't seem intrusive. 2 days later, when he went back to the park, she came running toward him again, healthy, happy, holding the bunny tightly. "You sent this, didn't you?" she said, grinning. He smiled. "Maybe." She nodded knowingly. "Mr. Bunny and Mr. Bear are friends now." He laughed softly. "That's good. Everyone needs a friend." She climbed beside him on the bench and rested her head lightly on his arm. "You're my friend too." He looked down at her, his heart full in a way he hadn't felt in years. He didn't answer, but his gentle smile said enough. For the first time in his life, he wasn't thinking about business deals or profits. He wasn't thinking about loneliness either. He was simply there, in that quiet park with a child who had unknowingly brought light back into his world. As the sun began to set, she whispered softly, "Do you know what I asked Santa for last year?" He shook his head. "What?" She smiled sleepily. "I asked for a daddy." He froze for a moment, his chest tightening. She looked up at him with innocent eyes. "Maybe this year." "He'll listen." And before he could say anything, she yawned. Resting her head back on his arm, he sat there silently, watching the sky turn shades of gold and pink, realizing that somewhere along the way, this little girl had become the most important part of his life, and that her wish might soon become his own. The next few weeks felt different for him. The park was no longer just a quiet place to escape the noise of his life. It had become something special, something that pulled him back every weekend without fail. It was the place where laughter found him again, where a small voice called him Mister, and where the walls around his heart began to fall apart piece by piece. He had never thought a child could change the rhythm of his life. But somehow she had. Every time he saw her running toward him, holding her teddy bear tight, it felt like sunlight breaking through a cloudy day. One Sunday morning, he arrived at the park early with a small picnic basket. He had spent the entire morning preparing simple things, sandwiches, juice, and cookies. It felt strange at first. He wasn't used to doing such things, but he remembered her little words. Mama says love starts with food, and that was enough to make him try. When she saw him waiting with the basket beside him, she gasped in delight. "You brought food?" she squealed. He nodded, smiling. "I thought we could have a picnic today." She clapped her hands. "Mama, look, a picnic." Her mother smiled softly. "That's very kind of you," she said quietly. He waved them over. "Please join us. I made plenty." They sat together on a soft blanket under the big oak tree. The air was filled with laughter and the rustle of leaves. The little girl talked nonstop, About school, about her favorite cartoon, about how Mr. Bear didn't like peanut butter. Her mother laughed, shaking her head gently. He couldn't stop watching them. The bond between them was beautiful, simply and pure. He could see how much the mother loved her daughter, how hard she tried to keep her world bright despite the struggle behind her eyes. "Your sandwiches taste better than the ones I make," the girl said, with her mouth full. He laughed softly. "Maybe because we made them with friendship." Her mother looked at him curiously. "You sound like someone who hasn't had to make sandwiches for a long time." He nodded. "That's true. It's been a while since I did anything that felt this real." Something about his tone made her pause. She didn't ask more, but her eyes softened, like she understood without words. After they ate, the little girl ran off to play near the swings, leaving the two adults sitting quietly on the blanket. The park was peaceful, the sound of laughter blending with birdsong. He glanced at her mother and said, "You've done a wonderful job raising her." She smiled, though her eyes looked a little sad. "I try my best. It's not always easy. Some days I wonder how I'll keep going." But then she smiles. "And I remember why I do everything." He nodded slowly. "She's lucky to have you." She looked away, tracing small circles on the blanket. "We're lucky too. She doesn't have much, but she's happy. I just want her to grow up knowing she's loved." He didn't know what to say after that. He could see strength in her, the kind that comes from surviving storms. It made him respect her even more. When they finally got up to leave, the girl ran back and grabbed his hand. "Promise we'll do this again?" she asked. He squeezed her hand gently. "I promise." From that day, their friendship grew. Sometimes he'd visit their small apartment to drop off groceries or help fix something broken. The neighborhood wasn't fancy. Small buildings with peeling paint, kids playing barefoot on the street. But every time he visited, he felt something warm inside. Something real. The little girl would always greet him with the biggest hug and chatter about her week. Her mother, still cautious but grateful, started to see that he wasn't there out of pity. He genuinely cared. One evening, as he was leaving after helping fix a broken light bulb, her mother stopped him at the door. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. He shook his head. "You don't have to," she hesitated. I'm not used to people helping without wanting something back." He smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time someone did." That night, as he drove home, he thought about her words. He realized how much both of them had been living without expecting kindness. He had wealth, but no warmth. She had love, but no help. And somehow fate had brought them together to fill what the other was missing. A few days later, his company hosted a charity event for underprivileged families. He invited them quietly, telling them it was just a fun fair with games and free food. He didn't tell them it was his event. He didn't want them to feel uncomfortable. The little girl had the time of her life, painting her face, winning small toys, eating ice cream until her hands were sticky. Her laughter echoed louder than the music around them. When she climbed into his arms to show him the toy she won, she whispered, "You make every day feel special." His heart melted at those words. For years he had heard people compliment him for his success, his intelligence, his achievements. But nothing had ever touched him like that small sentence from a child. After the event, her mother approached him quietly. "You didn't tell me this was your company's event," she said, half smiling. He looked embarrassed. "I didn't want you to think I was showing off," she laughed softly. "You didn't need to. You've already shown who you are." He didn't say anything, but inside something shifted. He was starting to see life through their eyes, through love that didn't depend on money or status, but small things: laughter, honesty, and kindness. One rainy afternoon, he stopped by their building again. The power had gone out and her mother was struggling to carry water upstairs. Without hesitation, he helped. By the time they reached her floor, they were both soaked, laughing like old friends. As they stood catching their breath, the little girl peeked out of the apartment door, giggling. "You look like wet cats," she said, covering her mouth. Her mother laughed, wiping her face. "She's not wrong." He chuckled, running a hand through his wet hair. "Maybe next time I'll bring an umbrella for all of us." That small, simple moment, standing there in the hallway, dripping wet but laughing, felt more precious than any victory he had ever had in business. It was raw, real, and filled with life. Later that night, the little girl drew another picture. This time it showed the three of them under one big umbrella. She proudly gave it to him the next day. "So you don't forget us," she said. He smiled, folding it carefully and tucking it into his wallet. "I could never forget you." From that moment, he stopped feeling like an outsider in their lives. He wasn't just the man from the park anymore. He was part of their small worlding, a friend, a helper, a quiet presence that made their days a little brighter. And slowly, something else began to change. Not just in him, but in her mother too. She started smiling more, talking more freely, even teasing him about his serious face. One evening, as they all sat on the balcony eating dinner together, the little girl said something that made them both freeze. "Mister," she began seriously, "if I could choose a papa, I'd choose you." The spoon slipped slightly from her mother's hand. The man blinked, unsure what to say. She smiled innocently. "You always come back. You listen to me. You fix things. That's what papas do, right?" Her mother reached out gently. "Sweetheart," but the little girl interrupted, her eyes still on him. "Can you be my daddy forever?" Silence filled the air for a few seconds. He felt something heavy yet warm rising in his chest. He looked at her gently. "You already have a daddy watching you from heaven," he said softly. "I'm just someone who cares a lot about you." She frowned slightly. "But I want someone who's here. Someone who stays." He couldn't speak. Her mother looked down, tears quietly forming in her eyes. She knew her daughter didn't mean to hurt. She was just being honest, her heart pure and full of longing. He finally reached out, brushing the girl's hair back gently. "I'll always be around, okay? You can count on that." Her face brightened again, and she hugged him tightly as if those words were enough. That night, when he went home, he couldn't sleep. Her words replayed in his mind again and again. "Can you be my daddy forever?" He realized that she didn't just fill the empty space in his heart. She gave it meaning again. And maybe, just maybe, he was ready to let his life be about more than work, more than loneliness, more than old wounds. He didn't know what the future would bring. But one thing was certain. The little girl and her mother had become a part of him. A part he never wanted to lose. He couldn't explain why, but every morning now began with the same thought, wondering if the little girl and her mother were doing all right. Work didn't feel the same anymore. The meetings, the reports, the constant phone calls, everything that once kept him busy now felt empty compared to the laughter he heard in that park. The world outside his office window looked the same, but inside something had changed. He had never been the kind of man who cared about small things. But lately he found himself walking into the park almost every evening, carrying something simple, a book for the girl, a cup of coffee for her mother, or sometimes nothing at all, just his quiet company. They would sit together under the old tree while the girl ran around, her tiny steps filling the air with joy. Her mother had started to open up slowly. She was shy, kind, and always polite. Her clothes were plain and her hands looked tired, but her eyes held strength. He learned that she worked at a cafe during the day and cleaned offices at night. All that for a small apartment where the roof leaked whenever it rained. The little girl never complained. She always said, "Mama says we should be thankful for what we have." One evening, as they sat watching the sunset, he noticed the mother's face looked more worried than usual. She was staring at her phone, biting her lip. The girl was playing with her doll on the grass, humming softly to herself. He asked gently, "Everything all right?" She looked up and forced a smile. "Just a small issue with the rent. The landlord wants it earlier this month. I'll manage somehow." He could see through her calmness. He wanted to help but didn't know how to offer without hurting her pride. She was the kind of woman who carried her dignity like a shield. She didn't want pity. She wanted respect. So he stayed quiet for a moment before saying, "If you ever need help, I'm around." She nodded but didn't answer. Her silence told him everything. She would never ask. That night, when he returned to his big, silent house, he sat in his study thinking about them. The walls felt colder than usual. He looked around at the furniture, the art, the chandeliers, things that once showed his success. Now they only reminded him of how alone he was. What good was all of this if there was no warmth inside? He picked up his phone and called one of his managers. "I want to open a position in the main office cafe," he said. "Hire someone hard-working, no fancy degree needed." He didn't mention any names, but the next week he quietly made sure the little girl's mother was offered the job. When she came to him later saying she had been given an opportunity out of nowhere, her eyes sparkled. "I don't know how it happened," she said, smiling. "But maybe luck finally noticed me." He smiled too, but didn't say a word. Watching her happiness was enough. The next few weeks brought small changes. She began working in his company cafe, and he would sometimes see her there when he went down for coffee. She never treated him differently. To her, he was just a man who listened, someone who didn't judge. That made him respect her even more. The little girl still met him at the park whenever she could. One day, she brought him a tiny paper crown she had made at school. "You're my king of smiles," she said proudly, placing it on his head. He laughed, embarrassed but deeply touched. Her joy was pure. It came from the heart. But happiness has a strange way of testing people. One rainy evening, when he finished work later than usual, he decided to stop by the park just for a walk. The rain was falling softly, the ground wet and shiny under the streetlights, and there, sitting on the same old bench, was the little girl, soaked, hugging her small bag tightly. He rushed over, his voice filled with worry. "What are you doing here? Where's your mother?" Tears were running down her cheeks as she whispered, "Mama said she would pick me up from school, but she didn't come. I waited and waited. And now it's dark." He crouched down beside her, his heart aching. "It's all right, don't cry. You're safe now. Let's wait together." He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her small shoulders. She clung to him tightly, her little hands trembling. After a while, her mother came running toward them, breathless, her hair wet from the rain. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "The bus broke down. I ran all the way." She hugged her daughter tightly, tears mixing with rain. He shook his head softly. "It's all right. She's fine now." The mother looked at him, guilt and gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you." "I don't know what I would have done." He smiled gently. "Just be careful. She's special." That night when he got home, her words replayed in his mind. She's special. She had become the one bright spot in his dull life. Every time she laughed, a small part of his heart healed. The next weekend, he invited both of them to visit the city zoo. At first, her mother refused, saying she didn't want to impose. But the girl's excitement couldn't be contained. She jumped up and down, begging, "Please, Mama, just one day." At the zoo, the little girl held both their hands, pulling them toward the animals. She laughed at the monkeys, stared wide-eyed at the lions, and squealed when the elephants sprayed water. For the first time in a long while, the man laughed freely. Even her mother smiled more than he had ever seen before. After lunch, as the girl ran ahead chasing pigeons, her mother looked at him quietly. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "But thank you." "She's been happier than ever." He looked at her and replied softly, "She's the one who made me happy again. I should be thanking you." Their eyes met for a moment, and something unspoken passed between them, a gentle understanding, the kind that didn't need words. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew deeper. He started helping the girl with her schoolwork, reading stories, and even attending a small parent day event when her mother couldn't take time off. The teachers thought he was her uncle. He didn't correct them. When the little girl introduced him to her classmates, she proudly said, "He's my best friend." But one evening, as he walked her home, she looked up at him with those big, innocent eyes and said something that stopped him in his tracks. "Can I tell you a secret?" she asked. "Of course," he replied. She held his hand tightly and whispered, "I wish you were my daddy." He froze, his throat tightening. The world around him went silent. He didn't know what to say. All he could do was kneel and hug her gently. "That's the sweetest thing anyone's ever said to me," he whispered. When they reached home, her mother noticed the softness in his eyes. Later that night, she called him to thank him again. But her voice trembled a little. "I think we're starting to depend on you too much," she said. "I don't want to take advantage of your kindness." He could feel the distance she was trying to create. "You're not taking advantage," he said quietly. "You both gave me something I didn't even know I needed." There was a long pause on the line before she spoke again. "Sometimes kindness makes people believe in dreams again. I'm scared of that." He didn't argue. He understood, but when he hung up, a deep sadness filled him. He wanted to be there for them, not as someone who felt sorry, but as someone who cared, truly cared. In the following days, he noticed she avoided meeting him at work. The little girl still waved at him whenever she saw him, but her mother kept her distance. He respected that, though it hurt. One night, he saw the lights in their apartment turned off early. The next morning, he found out from a building caretaker that they might have to leave soon. The rent had gone up again. His chest tightened. He wanted to fix everything but didn't know how without crossing a line. He spent that night thinking. Maybe some people are meant to meet just to heal each other for a while, not forever. But he couldn't let them go like this. Not when they had become his reason to smile. As he looked out of his window at the city lights, a thought came to him. Something small, something gentle. Something that could make their lives easier without hurting their pride. He picked up his phone and made another quiet call, arranging something that would change everything soon. He didn't know how things would turn out, but one thing was clear. The girl had already become part of his heart, and no matter what happened next, he would never let her feel alone again. The days turned colder as winter slowly arrived. The air felt heavier, filled with the smell of wood smoke and the distant sound of laughter from families decorating their homes. For most people, it was the season of joy, but for him, it carried a quiet ache. He hadn't seen the little girl and her mother for several weeks now. Ever since that night when her mother said they shouldn't depend on him, she had kept her distance. He didn't blame her. He understood her pride, her fears, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. Every evening when he passed the park, he found himself looking toward the old bench, half expecting to see the girl's bright smile. But it stayed empty. Only the wind moved the fallen leaves. He buried himself in work again, but it wasn't the same. The joy he had discovered through them had spoiled the emptiness he used to live with. Now silence felt heavier, and success felt smaller. One afternoon, while reviewing company reports, his assistant came in with a small envelope. "This was left for you at the cafe downstairs," she said. He opened it and his heart softened. Inside was a small hand-drawn card. The handwriting was uneven, the letters wobbly, but he recognized it instantly. It read, "I miss you, Mr. Smile. Mama says we can't go to the park for a while, but I hope you're happy. I still have the crown you gave me. Love, your friend." He sat back in his chair, staring at the little card for a long time. The corners were bent and there was a small stain from what looked like cocoa. It was so simple, yet it meant everything. That night, as he looked at the Christmas lights being hung outside his window, an idea slowly formed in his mind. He wanted to do something that would bring joy not just to the little girl, but to many like her, something that could remind people that kindness still existed. So over the next few weeks, he worked quietly behind the scenes. He told his staff to organize a small Christmas event at the city park, something open to everyone. There would be a big tree, lights, music, gifts for children, and hot food for anyone who came. He made sure the invitations reached schools, shelters, and community centers, including the one near the little girl's home. He didn't mention his name anywhere. He didn't want recognition. He just wanted her to smile again. When Christmas Eve finally arrived, the park looked magical. Fairy lights hung from every branch, children's laughter echoed through the air, and the smell of baked treats filled the space. A giant tree stood at the center, glowing in shades of gold and silver. He stood at a distance, watching the crowd gather. His heart was hopeful but uncertain. Would she come? And then, through the sea of people, he heard a small, familiar voice. "Mr. Smile." He turned, and there she was, the little girl in a red coat, running toward him with her arms open wide. Behind her, her mother followed slowly, smiling softly. He knelt down as she reached him, hugging her tightly. She was warm, her hair smelling faintly of soap and cocoa. "You came," he said quietly. "I told Mama we had to," she said proudly. "Because maybe you'd be here, and look. There's a big tree just like in the movies." He laughed, feeling his eyes sting a little. "Yes, it's beautiful, isn't it?" She nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's the biggest tree I've ever seen." Her mother walked up, her cheeks pink from the cold. "I didn't know you were behind this," she said gently. "You made the whole park come alive tonight." He smiled but said nothing. Just wanted people to have a reason to smile. As the evening went on, they walked together through the lights. The little girl ate cookies, danced with other children, and laughed freely. He and her mother stood watching, both silent but at peace. After a while, he noticed the girl disappear into the crowd. He searched around only to find her a few minutes later standing near the big Christmas tree. She was holding a small wrap box and looking up at him. "This is for you," she said shyly. He took the box, surprised. "For me?" She nodded eagerly. "I made it myself. I didn't have much, but Mama helped a little." He opened it carefully. Inside was a tiny wooden heart, painted unevenly with red and gold. There were 3 little words written across it in messy handwriting. "You, our family." For a moment he couldn't speak. His throat tightened and his eyes filled with tears. He looked down at her and she smiled innocently. "You said family means people who care. So now you have one." He knelt, his voice breaking softly. "Thank you, little one. That's the best gift anyone has ever given me." Then, without warning, she threw her arms around him. "I don't have a papa," she whispered. "Can you be my daddy forever?" The words hit him like a wave. The music, the lights, the crowd, everything faded away for a moment. All he could feel was the warmth of that small hug and the ache in his chest. He held her close, whispering softly, "I'll always be here for you, no matter what." Her mother stood nearby, tears glistening in her eyes. She walked closer and knelt beside them. "You've done so much for us," she said quietly. "More than anyone ever has. I didn't want to depend on you, but I can see how much you care. I can see it in her eyes." He looked at her gently. "I never wanted to replace anyone. I just wanted her, both of you, to feel safe." To smile, she nodded, her voice trembling. "You did that. You really did." They stood together, watching as snow began to fall lightly from the sky. The little girl reached her hands up, trying to catch the flakes, her laughter filling the air. He glanced at her mother again and she smiled. Not the polite, guarded smile she used to wear, but a real one, full of warmth. For the first time in years, he felt something inside him settle. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. Later that evening, when the event was ending, the girl's mother turned to him. "Would you like to come over for dinner tomorrow? It won't be fancy, just soup and bread, but it's something." He hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "I'd like that very much." The next day, he arrived at their small apartment with a basket of groceries. The place was simple but cozy, the smell of soup filling the air, a few paper stars hanging by the window. The little girl ran up and grabbed his hand. "You came," she said, her face glowing. He laughed. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." They ate together, laughed, and told stories. It wasn't about wealth or success. It was about warmth, about being seen and loved for who you are. The girl sat between them, giggling every time he made a funny face. After dinner, she brought out her crayons and started drawing on the table. She drew 3 stick figures, one tall man, one woman, and a small girl holding both their hands. Over it, she wrote in big, uneven letters, "My family." Her mother looked at the drawing, then at him. Her voice was soft. "I think she already made up her mind about you." He smiled, his heart full. "Then I guess I'm the lucky one." That night, as he walked home through the quiet, snow-covered streets, he looked up at the sky and felt something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. Not because of blood or obligation, but because 2 hearts had chosen him to be part of their little world. The park, the crown, the wooden heart, the simple dinners, they all became pieces of a new beginning. A life that wasn't measured by wealth or success, but by laughter, small hugs, and shared dreams. And as the snow continued to fall, he knew deep down that he would never spend another Christmas alone. Because somewhere, not too far away, a little girl had already given him the greatest gift of all: a family.